Hi guys, สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ
I am here with Michelle Waagaard. Is that like, did I say it correctly?
Nobody's ever says it. Like usually it's like Waagaard, but it's like the correct pronunciation is Waagaard, but
Waagaard,
yeah, that's
Michelle
the
Waagaard.
Norwegian
Oh, so you
pronunciation.
don't sound out the W. The W is like a
So it's like four A's in my last name, and the two A's in Norwegian becomes O.
oh, that's like a new
Yeah.
that's like new
So anytime you
information.
see a Nordic name with two A's, it's always O.
Oh, so it's not A or
No,
ah.
no.
Okay. So
Learn something new every day.
exactly. And that's what you should do. You should learn something new every
Yes.
day. So I haven't seen you in years.
God, I can't remember the last time I saw. I can't really remember. Like it can't be in the Vogue party when I saw you with your brother. Is that the last
I
time?
I think it's been that long.
But that was like 2012. That's 10 years.
Yeah, and
No, it
another
cannot
thing
be
is
10 years.
it can be 10 years, but I think with social media, it's like because
You
everyone's
feel like
following.
it's closer.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, I see her, I know what she's doing, but then wait, I haven't physically seen her for the longest time.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that we're having a conversation because like we text a lot and
Yes.
then we connect a lot, and I think we have a lot of parallels. For example,
We
I
known each other for a very, very long time.
since
Yeah.
we were very young,
Yeah.
so we had that parallel. We have
Yeah.
the parallel in coming from like different cultures,
Different cultures.
having different perspectives, also having been in the industry, entertainment industry, the local Thai
In the
industry,
90s, which is like that was a different era in itself.
a very different era with different experiences and
Yeah.
different situations.
Different standards. Yeah.
And then also another parallel is starting in a new new environment, new country,
Yeah.
and
MTV.
MTV.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's like, when I crossed from Thailand away to Singapore,
Yeah.
or even crossing from the US, having lived in California, coming back to Thailand.
Yeah.
And then for yourself,
I went to Norway and then I went to Germany. So that was, yeah, having to start over like my career again. That was something. Yeah.
now for you to start your career over, you did at a much later time chapter in your life.
Yeah. And it was, when I was in Norway, that wasn't so bad because I already got a job when I started. But when I moved to Germany, so I moved there, I was 36 years old, and I've been in Bangkok since, the 90s, and I had the connections. I know everybody. I know everybody here, and I've spent a long time working in the industry, but I also started working in sort of the corporate world a little bit. And it was easy to get my foot in the door. And it was quite hard to go to Germany and then start from scratch. I didn't speak the language, so I had to apply for English speaking job. I didn't have the connections to, like, for example, have the same jobs that I wanted to in the entertainment industry, media industry. It's just not the same. So that was very, I didn't know anyone that was starting from scratch. And that's a really like wake up call in life. Like you really see what you're made of and like, oh, these things that I've had earlier in life is because I was very fortunate and lucky to have known the right people.
Mm.
But now I'm really dependent on me and my own talent and like how much grit I have to go after it. So yeah, that was something.
When you were in that stage of having to like start over,
Yeah.
was it, were you was it like a lot to deal with? Were you depressed? Were
Oh
you
my
like
God, yeah. It was, I think I mentioned this to you. I think the hardest part for, because, I started going to more of the corporate world, to more like what I call normal job, normal
Yeah.
9 to 5 job. And it's a very hard transition when you've been, I became famous when I was 16. People knew my name. And then having that sort of goodwill throughout your like career, like especially here in Bangkok, and then suddenly having all of that stripped from you. It's tough to sort of go, yeah, to like deal with like people don't know who you are anymore, and you are just not relevant anymore, you don't feel important anymore. And I think that's really tough to deal with. It has to, it's ego, basically it's ego. And I had to humble myself a lot, be like, listen, you're no one, you really are no one, you don't matter, like don't think you're shit. Sorry, can I swear?
Yeah, we can say shit, ass, fuck, anything we
But yeah,
want
you
here.
don't think that you're shit, you know? And it was just like a very humbling experience. So I was very depressed because I was like applying for all these different jobs, like a rejection after rejection. I'm like, my CV is pretty awesome, you know, but
Mhm.
it's also a very weird CV. Like people didn't know what to do with me. And like, you know, I've been a pop singer. I was in MTV, I was in radio, like then I went into the gaming industry. Like, what is it that you actually do? Like this was also a very hard part when you want to when I came into like job interviews in Germany, like, what is it that you actually do? I'm like, that's a very good question, actually.
That's a really good perspective that you just shared, because when I mean, like, for myself, having worked in corporate here, I know, like, for the local market in
Yeah.
Thailand, obviously they're gonna recognize me for the work I do in
Yeah.
front of the camera.
Yeah.
But I don't have that if I'm going to send my resume, like if I'm in in other countries, because they're not gonna recognize who I am
Yeah.
or from TV, or it doesn't even matter. What matters is whether you qualify
Yeah.
for the position and the
And
work.
and you know, and that's also interesting because you go into a job interview and they're like, and the first question is, tell me about your experience. And I'm like, how do I even start? And I'm like, well, I started out as a pop star. I was in the teens. I was a Spice Girl in a Thai Spice Girl band when I was in the 90s. You know, that's how do you like. And then I was in MTV, you know, and then I was in Norway for another like sort of similar VJ job, and then I went into radio, and then I was, you know, I was modeling. It's kind of like, okay, and
Yeah,
how do you fit into this position?
you're right.
And also, it's kind of like there is a stereotype that comes with like that people also. I also noticed this. Like I had to overcome like the stereotype of like because if you think like when you're in the entertainment media industry, like you want to be famous, like can you actually, are you smart enough to be in the corporate world? Like, do you have what it takes to be in the corporate world? Because you're so used to being in a front end camera, but this is like hard work, right? So I also had to really work on that balance, which was really tough.
I relate because I've been in and out of corporate.
Yeah.
Probably not with the experience of having to start overseas, but having to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Because the first impression that people will have is like, okay, like in Thai, there's the word dara. It's like, okay, so this dara is going to be working and managing this team. And then it's like, of course, you're going to have people who are going to have preconceived ideas and opinions about you. That's my experience. But for you, it's like you're in a totally different environment where it's like whatever you're saying in your interview doesn't really.
It also sounds unbelievable to be like, who has this life? And they're like, why are you here? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like if I do decide eventually to go back, overseas, I'm like, I'll probably find myself in the same situation with you when they're like asking me about my experience. If I'm not working in the same industry, if I decide to work in the corporate industry, it's kind of like, okay, where do you start and how do where do you go with that? But it is a part of who we are, though.
Yeah, but I think what it did to me is also it gave me, like I said, I had to like really go deep and be like, okay, I need to prove myself that I can do this. I have to prove to people that I have the talent, that I am worth it. And I think once that I did land the jobs and got where I am, it actually felt more than like precious because like I knew that I'd worked for it and I'd proven myself that I have talent for it. And that's because sometimes when you're in the entertainment industry or here, you don't know if you're getting things because it's your name or your face, whatever. So, but when it's the corporate world, his phone went off.
I know, this is like live.
This is like, I'm sorry, broadcast 101. We learned this. He's supposed to be a professional. We're both working in this industry and you always turn off your phone. This is,
well, I wanted to give the realness in this interview where you can hear like them doing coffee in the background, you have the phone ringing, so it's all about being real. How was my answer?
It's okay. I'm sorry, but no. That's standard. I can having the real environment I can go with, but the phone, nah. That's
true because like because I have the audio separately, so that's like on a podcast right now. It's like, all right, my bad, sorry. So we were talking about also talking about ego. And we go through it. We both gone through it. A
Yeah.
lot of people in our industry go through it. Even people in other industries.
They don't want to
right?
admit they have ego. I think a lot of people.
Well, we did talk about how ego can go both ways. There's healthy ego and there's unhealthy ego.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like my opinion, well, I mean, you can read on it, but it's okay to have ego because ego in the right way.
You have to have ego.
Exactly.
Because you have ego, so it means confidence in a way. You have to know that, I got this shit. Like, I got this. But the unhealthy thing, I had that when I was younger. I had that unhealthy one and I think it's because you get fame so early.
Yeah.
You were a teenager. I was an asshole. Like, I am embarrassed when I think back. I'm like, oh my God. Like that ego, oh,
That's unhealthy ego.
it's unhealthy.
And I think
entitled ego.
And
it's entitled, and that's the worst kind.
And
I had it, and I'm sorry to anyone who had to endure that.
And I apologize as well for anyone who might experience me being like an asshole as well. And I think what's most important why we're sharing this is that at the end of the day, we're human, we're real, and we want to show that even though we've been part of the industry, that you see us, but it's all about being able to grow and mature from it, and then being able to share that so that other people can grow from it too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like it's okay to admit that you have been an asshole. Like it's just a natural path of life.
Yeah, well, I remember your good friends are the
and
worst.
I didn't think I was. That's the worst part. Like I thought I was so cool, and I'm like, no, I'm really down to earth. And I'm looking back, I'm like,
well, I was called out too. I remember like a good friend saying that, back in the day, like at times you were an ass, and I'm like, I was. And then there was like specific like situations, and then I realized, oh wow, I was.
Yeah.
And then and I think that realization helps a lot.
Yeah.
Because then you move on from it.
Yeah.
You understand it.
You need to be able to reflect.
Yeah.
I think like especially when you're in entertainment, I don't just not entertainment, but just in life in general, you need to be able to look back and reflect and look at like your own behavior, like not just judge other people's behavior, but like what was your role in whatever was happening. And actually question, hey, was I right in this? Was the way I approached it, and be like, you know what, that was not the right way of thinking, that was not the right approach, and that's okay, and I'm going to change now. I accept that. But it's tough. It's really tough because I've had to really like look in the mirror, and I didn't like to admit that that I was not always great. I didn't like to admit that, but
I think the word is self-awareness.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they take a journey through life and they're not self-aware. They're quick to judge others. They're quick to say things about others. They're quick to be opinionated, but then they lack self-awareness. And I think having self-awareness is where it starts. So you can realize the things that you have done wrong or you have done wrong to others, then you just better yourself and you grow.
Yeah. And I also think, I mean, personally for me, that self-awareness also came because of the things that were kind of taken away, and I was, when the fame went away, or when I had to apply for a job, when I had to start, when I didn't have that security around me, that's when I really opened my eyes to see what I had and like what, how my life was, how I was acting, and just what I took for granted, etc. And then made me question myself. So I think also sometimes you really have to go sort of into those darker moments you have to like fail in order to see.
Well, I think it's only when you're in darker phases of your life that's when you are able to really see. Yeah, I think it's just like it's life.
Yeah. I think and it's really weird to say. It's like I don't want anyone to go to darker moments because it's really hard, but I think it's also, I also see some people say I've never had depression before, I don't know what it's like, and I'm like, that's remarkable, but I don't know, like if you have that self-aware, I don't know, and I don't want to upset anyone here, but it's just like I really do feel that when you are in those darker moments, that's really when those moments of reflection come. But it's also about the support system you have around you and what helps you to educate and grow.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Plus, I want to add on, it's also being able to take that personal journey to grow and understand yourself, to be able to open yourself to have the right support.
Yeah.
Sometimes in certain stages of your life, you have the wrong support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, oh yeah. Yeah. I've had, I right now I'm very fortunate. I have people in my life who will call me out, but yeah, I have to be willing to accept it. But there have been times before where you don't want to listen, or you don't have, the people are just not there for the right intentions.
Yeah. That's why it really depends on like what stage you are in your life, stage of like understanding yourself, stage of like self-awareness.
Yeah.
And then in turn, that's where you're able to attract and magnetize the right energies that you need. Because sometimes when you look back, and I look back at myself at certain stages in my life where it's like, I'm not in a good place. It's like, I'm also attracting the wrong energies.
Yeah.
So you just have to be in the right place.
Yeah. So. But I also wonder sometimes, it's like, if it also has to do with aging, because I think for you and me, and we have to accept it, I think it's also accepting that we are also growing older, and like I find myself clinging to this romantic nostalgia of like the 90s and 2000s, but that was over 20 years ago, and learning to let that go and like accept that there's a whole new generation now, and like they are the one like running the place, and like I'm not relevant like anymore. Like what I have is no relevance anymore. And I think that's also something, I also think it has something a little bit to do with our age, why we're so self-reflective at this moment.
Definitely, because we've gone through a lot more. So we have a lot more experience.
But it's also the generational shift, I think, like, because I think, we grew up when technology was not the same. We didn't have social media. We didn't have anything. It was just such a different era of communication, and how we got, how we got news or how we communicate with each other, versus now we just kind of, and because I'm really curious to see how you or I, if we had the tools for like this, a show like this, or social media back when we were young and super creative, like I'm very curious what we could have made of it. But I also wonder, like, I would have destroyed myself.
Well, I think
I'm so very glad that there's no proof.
Well, it was really different times that we were in. I mean, I've had this talk with fellow 90s colleagues, and I think we were growing into a generation where we had to really go out and find information to build who we are.
Yeah.
Our characters, because it's like we couldn't access it at the tip of our like fingers. We had to actually kind of go out and figure it out.
Yeah.
Like really, when we listen to music, we have to really listen to music.
Like even like I remember, because I always wanted to do like make TV shows and stuff, but it was, to me, it was the record and the editing. Like, oh my God, having to like Final Cut and all that editing, like it was a nightmare. Like you had to have like proper equipment, and now like I'm just so jealous. Like you can do everything with the phone. I was like, damn, they're so.
That is true. It's like now
I'm
like
so jealous. I wish I had that.
Everyone's like
really wish I had.
Everyone's like a photographer, a videographer, a producer, like all in one, because of like the times we're in.
But but I love it because you see how creative people are. Like there are so much creativity in people, and they're given the right tools now, like because we have these futures for editing, futures for photography, it's much easier, and you just see this whole new creative world. I think that's super inspiring, and that's where I really love seeing.
That's where, like, okay, I'm gonna go back really quickly about relevance. I think relevance is just what you were saying. It's being able to accept where you are and the times we're in. So when you're talking about going back to the 90s, I think there's when you hold to the past, where I feel too much of the past, where it becomes unhealthy because you're stuck in the past.
Yeah.
But I also find the word relevance meaning and defining as, if you understand the current generation and understand how they think, or open to how they think and how things are, it does make you relevant whether you're from the 90s or
Yeah.
like you're older or you're mature. So I don't know. That's my opinion on the word relevance.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because like right now I work with a lot of extremely creative people in a company that is very a lot of and creative people where there's a lot of people creative content. Just my coworkers and my team, their knowledge, what they educate me on, it's just like it's amazing. I love learning from them, and they make me feel relevant because what I learn from them. And I think that's a big one of my biggest lessons. It's like allowing, like, you know what, I'm learning from you now, and that's how keep yourself relevant, because I think that's hard for a lot of people, that they want to be like, no, I know best because I'm older or whatever. But if you're humble and you allow yourself to listen, like, oh my god, the world opens to you.
I totally agree. I think I've always been one who I've always gravitated towards learning from like the younger generation, because I feel like you constantly
trends.
Exactly. And then they're the future.
Yeah.
Basically. Just like we were the future at one point in time.
Exactly. But it is true. And I think it's just like we just have to accept it. Like we just need to keep learning, and we might not always understand it, because I'm like, how is this a trend? Why is this trending? But just go with it and accept it. Yeah.
Okay, I think that ends our session.
Oh, good session.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.